Welcome to Evolvepreneur Podcast Channel. My very special guest today is Bryan Clayton, who's the CEO of GreenPal. So welcome, Bryan, to the show.
John, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here, man.
Cool, man. All right, so let's just dig into your bio a little bit because it's a kind of interesting kind of story. I don't think we've ever had a lawnmower company in our podcast before, so we're interested to see how we go with that one. But you co-founded GreenPal, an online marketplace that connects homeowners with local lawn care professionals. GreenPal has been called the Uber for lawn care by Entrepreneurialism magazine and has over 200,000 active users, completing thousands of transactions per day. Before starting GreenPal, Bryan Clayton founded Peachtree, which is interesting because it's used an accounting software program called Peachtree, in one of the largest landscaping companies in the state of Tennessee, growing to over $10 million a year in revenue, before it was acquired by Lusa Holdings in 2013. Bryan's interest and expertise related to entrepreneurialism, small business growth, marketing, bootstrapping business from zero revenue to profitability and exit. So that's an interesting background. And we had a bit of a chat before the show where your sort of main motivation is to sort of share your ideas and how you do things. So that's quite an interesting thing because you've got a kind of a mixture there, haven't you? You've got a mixture between a traditional kind of tools business and an online business, and I know a lot of people struggle with that, right?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do with your life is start a business, because if you're doing it right, it'll cause you to evolve every 3 to 5 years into a completely new person. That's definitely been the case with me. 20 years of business, I've had to change and adapt and grow. The business, the marketplace extracts that out of you. And one of those big shifts that I had to navigate was when I started my first landscaping business from just me and a push mower, and then I grew it to me and 150 employees over a 15-year period of time. I thought I knew there was everything to know about business. I grew it to over 10 million in revenue, and the business was acquired. And here I am riding high, and thinking that I had conquered the world. And then I thought, well, now I'm going to do something easy. I'm going to start a tech business. I'm going to start a mobile app. And boy, I didn't know what I didn't know. It was a lot harder to get GreenPal, which is like the Uber of lawn mowing, to get this marketplace going than I thought it was going to be. But just stuck with it, didn't give up. And we're an 8-year overnight success. Several 100,000 people using our app to get their grass cut, doing over $20 million a year in revenue in the lawn mowing business. And I think the way we got to where we are is we didn't give up. We just kept working on the business, working on ourselves, and learning from our failures and applying those learnings to make the product better and better and better. And so, navigating the transition from a blue collar type of entrepreneur to a tech entrepreneur was a tough one. But that's one thing I love about business is it challenges you, causes you to grow, causes you to level up.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because when you talk about the Uber lawn care, it's like, let's say, look at taxi industry and the disruption there, because taxis never really got their act together in terms of doing anything. And I think I had the same thing with, I had a client, I had a lawnmower client where we tried different kind of things for him, and they all fall back to the same old thing. Oh, we just do it this way, right? And all this sort of stuff. And I said to him, well, one of the things that I saw as a problem for him was he couldn't control his revenue. Like if it rained, he was doomed, right? He couldn't work, right? And then because he couldn't be digging people's yards up on the lawnmower with all the mud and everything. So it was like you had to wait till it grows. So then they'd be complaining, oh, my grass is growing, there's lions and tigers in there. And it's like, and I said to him, well, why don't you just charge a monthly fee? Like just charge a monthly fee and you determine when you go and they know you're going to come. So there's no thing when you flatten your revenue. He thought that was a good idea, but he would never implement it. After 2 years of doing it, he never implemented it. And I said, do you realize you could have been getting normal recurring income by now and the business is worth something? But that little change he couldn't handle, right? He couldn't do
Something about the lawn mowing business attracts stubborn entrepreneurs, because you're right. And I think it may be all small business owners. You get used to doing things one way and you don't want to change. You don't want to innovate. You don't want to evolve. And I think it's going to come time in the next 5 to 10 years where every business, no matter what line of work you're in, you're going to have to be a technology business. Yes. You're going to have to think like a tech startup. You're going to have to adapt and adopt technology to run your business better, because 5 years from now, nobody's going to want to leave a check under the mat, leave a voicemail, have to deal with a paper invoice, or have to try to wrangle you to come take care of the service for them. They're going to want the Uber-like experience where you just push a button and magic happens. And if your business is not set up to deliver that, you're going to get left behind.
was like my current lawn mowing guy, like he mows the guy next door. So well, every second week come mow my place, right? And then no invoices come for a year. And it's like, what's going on here, dude? You got to bill me? Yeah, I'll bill you. You have to turn him down every time. So what are you doing this bill? And in the end, I said, look, I'll tell you what, I'll just pay you the same amount every week for a year to catch up.
It shouldn't be this difficult, but it is. And, that's what our app has set out to solve, is to make it easy, make it simple for both sides of the transaction. One thing about the lawn mowing business is that it's low barriers to entry. And so it's a great way to kind of cut your teeth on starting a business. It's a great way to kind of cut your teeth on learning the ins and outs of running your own little business. And so it attracts a lot of people who are just new to business ownership, and they don't know these things. We're not taught these things in school. No. We're not taught things like bookkeeping and customer service and systems and processes. And so that's one thing that our app has set out to do, is to kind of demystify all that for lawn care services and give them kind of like a business in a box almost. And all they have to do is just show up, do a good job for their clientele, and everything just handled for them. Wow. And on the other side of the transaction for homeowners, it's just a delightful, seamless way for them to get this chore done. But we focus on just this one chore.
And they know, they know that's been done. They've been billed for it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, this guy's been in business a long time. I know how he survives. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you scale like this? If you can't handle the money, then you're never going to be able to. So you're always going to be doing it on your own. You'll never have another employee because
that's
you won't
right.
be able to scale the money. And if you can't scale
that's right.
the money,
yeah. Getting these folks to understand the difference between working in your business and on your business is a hard lesson that I think every business owner has to learn. And there's a big difference between owning a business and being self-employed. Mm-hmm. And so like the guy you're talking about, he's more or less self-employed. He's got a pretty good job that he owns. Mm-hmm. But there's a gap between that and running and owning your own business, having the systems and processes to where it hums like a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. That's a gap that nobody teaches you. You have to kind of learn it on your own. You kind of have to seek out people that are talking about this stuff, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about, like there's a great book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I recommend every entrepreneur read that, because that's all that book is about, is the difference between working in your business and working on your business.
Well, I actually bought that book a long time ago, because when I was one of my businesses, like you talk about, change business every time. I think you automatically tank your business after 10 years because you need to change, right? Nowadays, technology tanks you instead. But yeah, I used to give that book out to clients, like it's a free book. Back in the day when you had to buy it from Amazon and wait like 6 weeks for it, 8 weeks, even now. But then I signed up for them, right? So I signed up for this E-Myth, and I said, how much is it a month? It's like $1,800 a month. We're talking 20 years ago, so that wasn't cheap, right?
Wow.
And I'm going, okay, what do we do? And it's like, we've got this 18 months worth of modules, and they're very well done, but they only spoon feed you so many modules at a time, because obviously they want to get your money. So you get like 3 months worth for the first $1,800. And I said, I checked the list. I said, marketing's around 12 months down the track. And
that should be class number 2.
By the time we get to the marketing. And he goes, that's the way it works. And when you look at their foundation, it is. But the reality is no one's going to do that amount of work that they need to do to set the business up properly, that 12-month period. And that's the tough bit is, you've got to, in some respects, you've got to do that work and you've got to do the marketing at the same time. You can't do the one thing and then the next. Well, their theory was you work through these modules and you get each bit right, and then you release your marketing, which, yes, would make sense. But the reality in the marketplace is 12 months is a long time. And you've got a runway of 12 months to not make any money for 12 months while they get their systems together.
I got bills to pay.
Bills to pay, right?
That's one of my, I agree. Like, I think marketing has to be in the DNA of the business from the ground up day one. It's like if you're inventing a new product from scratch or you're starting a traditional style of business, like you have to be thinking about marketing and distribution and how you're going to reach clientele from like day one, because at every successful business, small or large, like there's a marketing engine at its core, and you got to be thinking about this stuff from day one. But the reality is, like, there's a lot of stuff you got to be pretty good at to run your own business. One of my favorite analogies is like one of my favorite games growing up when I was a kid was Super Mario Kart. And, you had 5 drivers you could choose from. You could have Bowser, Princess, Toad, Mario, Luigi. And every one of these drivers was good at one thing. Like Toad handled really well. Princess was accelerated really well. Bowser was the fastest, but he was slow off the line. But there was one driver, Mario, who was kind of half good at all these things. And he didn't really excel at any one thing, but he was pretty good at all this stuff. So if you were like a beginner, you could you use Mario and hang. And I think in business, you kind of have to be Mario. You got to be pretty good at marketing, pretty good at innovation, pretty good at systems, pretty good at legal, HR, all these things you got to be kind of half good at. And that's what's going to get you through the first 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. And I think having that skill set, or at least having the information. I mean, nowadays, once upon a time you couldn't Google this stuff, but now you can almost Google it and find out information pretty cheaply. So I think at the end of the day, there's no excuse not to learn it. It's just that
no excuse.
They don't want to learn it. Or they just sort of hope that they'll get someone else to do it and then rely on them and then find out that they don't really know what they're talking about. Because, I mean, my son, the tech is an interesting thing because we're in the tech business too. We developed a platform for authors, consultants, like anybody who creates content to create their own website system. And my son's come into the business and I'm teaching him from ground up about, different aspects of the business, like work in the business, work out the methodology, how you think about customers, marketing, all those things that you learn the hard way usually.
Right.
And I think that's the problem, is that people don't want to learn it the hard way. They want to kind of skip over it. But the reality is those things, those lessons about pricing, for example, or, figuring out what, how to approach a customer in the marketing and all that kind of stuff. That's the things that people end up just, get away from if they're good at one thing. So I've got a lot of clients who are good at content creation. And the reason we created this app was that because they had no clear direction. What they would do is just create a bunch of content and then create a bunch of websites and then sign up for a bunch of software applications and then just have a big sort of mess to deal with that never made any money because they had no structure, a bit like Lawnmower, right? But they love making content. So we created an application for them to be able to do all that easily, but then give them a framework to work around. So, okay, fill in the blanks and this will be your business. And then you've got that structure in it rather than try to figure it out along the way after make all those mistakes.
And, somebody has to be willing to innovate, improve, change to go through that framework you've made for them. And the sad thing is most business owners aren't willing to do that. And I think you kind of have to be willing to do that to get from 6 figures to 7 figures, from 7 figures to 8 figures. You got to be willing to innovate and work on the business, not in the business. Mm-hmm. And the reality is everybody talks about work-life balance and, you're going to burn yourself out if you work out over 40 hours a week. That may be true, but I think there's another 40 hours a week of learning. You have to have a well-balanced diet of information, and that could be YouTube, podcasts, books, audiobooks, blog posts. You have to be filling your knowledge with all this stuff, like what you're talking about, and being willing to implement it in your business to get to the next level. If not, you're just going to be self-employed for a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger, is that if you get to a point where you can do all the work but no one else can, eventually you do burn yourself out, even if you're because you can't keep up with the demand, you can't grow the scale of business.
That's right.
I work on the principle that we do something, I do something, figure out how to do something, maybe a new product or whatever, figure out how to do it, document it, and then get someone else to do it badly. Because if you give it to them, they do a bad job of it. You expect that, right? You don't go in there, they're going to do a perfect job just like me. They expect to do it badly, coach them through it, and then go, look, goodbye. You can have that job now because I'm not doing it anymore.
Right.
And I mean, I had an employee the other day. She worked for me 9 years, and we had a client that was a little less desirable. Let's put it this way: they were saying a few things that weren't really bad, but my girl's Filipino, so they're very sensitive, right? They're very, in that particular area, they're very sensitive. If you accuse their work, they get really upset. And so he was a bit accusory. Anyway, I said, well, okay, you've done this now. Tell him you've done it. He said, oh, no, you do it. And I'm going, no, you're doing it. Because guess what? The client's getting fired anyway.
Right.
So he doesn't know that. I actually told him he's fired and he wouldn't leave, right? Because the other thing is, I reckon, is you've got to be prepared to fire a client.
Yeah, absolutely.
People can't do that.
And the thing is, as the owner, as the founder, for a period of time, it's harder to teach somebody else and make somebody else do it the way you've laid out for them just to do it yourself.
Mm.
And most founders fall into that trap of like, it's just easier to do it myself. Well, you're never going to build a business with that mentality. You have to think processes, you have to think systems and routines, and you have to think delegation. And you have to go through like the high leverage activities of delegating these things out so people can focus on them doing better than you. And that's what hangs up, I think, a lot of business owners in any industry, particularly the one that I know is the lawn mowing business. It hangs them up more 99% of the time. And you got to focus on like one of my favorite books is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. And he talks about activities that are important but not urgent. And so in training somebody and delegating something to them is an important thing, but it's not urgent. Like it's not burning the house down. And so the problem is most time as business owners, we're dominated by the things that are urgent but not important. And we stay there and we never build a meaningful business because we stay stuck in that paradigm.
And it's interesting, actually, like I've just finished a launch with Tony Robbins, and one of the things that he always says is that people underestimate what they can do in 10 years, but overestimate what they can do in 6 months.
So true.
And that's the thing, like it's a slow progression of improvement. And I think that's like, I'm like that. I beat myself up a lot because I could have been further than I thought. Like I could have got further on this. But then I look back at the amount of work I've got to do and what I've got to do on a day-to-day basis. And I've got to squeeze this almost this part-time job into the full-time job. The part-time job is working on the business and involving it and making it work. And sometimes I'm 2 people,
That's right.
Each other out. But you're saying, well, this person's got to, you can't do that today. You got to do this, and it's like these little people in your head running around saying things, trying to run this business.
For me, it was like Monday through Friday was working in the business, just holding it together. Putting out fires, making sure customers were happy, making sure we had enough employees, making sure enough money in the bank, working in the business. And then Saturdays and Sundays, I would carve out just 4 or 5 hours maybe and work on the business. Pick one thing. Like we need a better employee training system. We need a better marketing system. We need a better customer follow-up system to make sure people are happy. Or whatever it is, focusing on one process and trying to systematize it.
One problem, right?
Yeah. And if you do that over and over and over again, the compound interest builds up. And next thing you know, 5 years later, you've got an actual business.
And that's interesting because I have the same principle that I don't work for clients on weekends. It's not like I don't work on weekends. I just don't do client stuff because the thing is you end up in a 7-day-a-week thing where you actually never get any, what are you going to do, work 8 days a week now?
Yeah.
You can't get to that 7 any longer than 7 days and you just burn out real quick.
I like that. Don't work for clients on Saturday or Sunday. Work for yourself. Work for the business. Work to level the business up. And you have to delegate. You have to carve out that time for what Dr. Stephen Covey calls those high leverage activities. Yeah. It's the stuff that's important, but not urgent.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's really easy to get tied up with activity every day. You're just putting out fires and stuff like that. I mean, the thing that we have is it's still to this day, it seems weird, but Monday morning always seems to be disaster morning, right? You get up and Monday morning is always disaster morning.
Yeah, always is.
You've got to fix something. And I used to have, probably only in the recent few months, if that, I've actually blocked off Monday morning now. I don't make appointments on Monday morning at all. And so what happens is that's now delegated for disaster time or fixing things up. So I know it's going to happen. So I think almost making appointments with yourself to do certain things is the way to go, because at the end of the day, then you block yourself and you can't then say, oh, hang on, I've got to do this important meeting. No, I didn't have one. So You've got no excuse, right?
You were prepared for it. Listen, it's going to happen. You're going to have to put out fires. Every business owner has to. You just also have to allocate that time to work on the high leverage stuff, or else you're going to get caught in like this illusion of progress or like all of this fake work where you're working your ass off, but you're not getting anywhere. You're not building a real business. And next thing you know, you're burnt out and you can't make payroll. And everybody wants to be an entrepreneur until you can't make payroll. And
I had to buy a brand new car every 2 weeks when I had an IT business. Like I had this software accounting business and I had 23 staff. And I think we paid something like $60,000 in wages every fortnight. And I tell you what, we made payroll, but I tell you what, it's not fun.
Yeah. It's not fun when you can't make it.
Of the day, right? It's like, oh God, here comes 20 grand. And it's like, and we had 23 staff, but it gets the thing with business, I think, is people go, oh, you've got a big business, it's just zeros. So you just
Yeah.
take, it's just zeros. Your zeros increase your problems. It doesn't decrease your problems, I reckon.
That's exactly right. But the business, as the founder, can, at least for me, can be the source of your purpose. It can be the source of why you get out of bed in the morning. And so you got 23 employees and they depend on you. And if you screw it up, they're not going to have a livelihood. And that can lend purpose to one's life. And that's one of the things I love about running a business, is that it causes what I do on a day-to-day basis to matter and be important, and to lend an interesting storyline to my life. And I like that. I don't take it lightly. And so I almost enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah. I think it's like, I think you have to be a certain type of person to be an entrepreneur, right? You have to be ready to take the punches, because sometimes, most people take a punch and they're down in one fall. That's it.
Yeah, but it's one of the best things you can do with your life. I believe that.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing with like COVID and stuff is that it's created a lot of people in the small business. Like there's been a surge in people because they had no choice. They lost their job or they had to pivot and stuff like that. So I think in some respects, it's helped people sort of get out of ruts that they're probably in already.
For a lot of people, like, it didn't happen to you; it happened for you.
Yeah,
because it caused you to start your own thing, or maybe if you were in business and COVID was detrimental to it, maybe it caused you to take the business down to the studs and rebuild it from the inside out, and it caused you to innovate, and believe it or not, 5 or 10 years later, you'll be glad it happened. Yeah. Most every major crisis my businesses over the last 20 years have gone through, I always looked back and I was glad in a way that it happened. Like my company, my landscaping company, going through the 2008 crisis, it hurt. It hurt really bad, but it caused us to be leaner, more efficient, get the fat out of the business, and that was the thing that enabled me to sell the company 4 years later.
Yeah, because it's basically almost like a cleansing effect, right? You end up with those. So tell me about the tech startup, right? Because I've been there. I've sort of started that tech startup business, and I think, as you say, it's something that people don't really understand. And I think, as you say, people need to understand that they're in the tech business now. It's almost like McDonald's is in the real estate business. And,
that's right.
And you think that McDonald's is in the burger business, they're actually in the real estate business and the franchise business. And I think the biggest problem is most people don't realize what sort of business they're really in. And to me, because we build a platform for this kind of market that has trouble with getting those things together, mainly because they need to have those sort of things in place. That's the systems they need to have in place to run their business properly, which they're not going to necessarily put in place because of all the myriad of options out there. So why did you sort of pick lawn mowing? Did you see something in it? Like, in terms, obviously you're doing landscaping and lawn mowing. There's lots more money in landscaping than lawn mowing, I'm guessing. So why not start a landscaping business instead of a lawn mowing business?
Yeah, so my first company, Peachtree, that I built to over 150 people and 10 million a year in revenue, was a lawn maintenance and landscaping installation business. So we kind of did it all. When I sold it, I retired. And I got bored, and I thought, okay, now, I don't want to do that hard work again. I want to start an easy business. I want to start a software business. Little did I know how hard it was going to be. And for me, I was kind of solving my own problem. I saw every day how hard it was for homeowners to get hooked up with a good lawn mowing service, because they would call my office every day, 100 people call us a day. Can you come cut my grass? And we didn't really do residential work anymore in the latter years of that business.
No one wants to, right?
Yeah. So we would refer these people to smaller operators every day. So we were kind of in effect like a little connector service. So sold that company, and then I'm observing, what's going on in 2013 with Uber, Airbnb, Lyft, Grubhub, companies that were making real world commerce on a local level easier and frictionless. And I thought, wow, an app needs to exist for what I just spent the last 15 years doing, because it's got all kinds of problems that technology can solve. And the idea was the same then 8 years ago that it is today. The problems we're solving are the same. The vision is the same. We have approached it 1,000 different ways and tried 1,000 different things, but the vision and the idea is still the same thing as it was when we started. What I didn't understand was, when you're starting a tech company, most of the time you're inventing something brand new from scratch that does not yet exist. And so that's very different than starting a traditional style of business. So you can go out and start a construction company, you can start a restaurant, you can start a hair salon, you can start a
Kind of a
home
blueprint
cleaning
for that.
business.
There's a
Yeah,
blueprint
it's
or something.
pretty straightforward. You can kind of know what you got to do. You can follow like a roadmap somebody else has built, and you can kind of innovate on top of that. But when you're starting a technology service, most of the time it's brand new. It does not yet exist, and so you're inventing something brand new, and you're having to change user behavior. And I didn't understand like the challenges around that when we were getting started because I'd never done it. And the first 3 years were really, really, really tough. All we did was just beat our heads against the wall. We would get people to try the app, and then we would meet with them to try to figure out where we needed to improve and what they wished the app would do that it didn't. And we just did that over and over and over again, and let the customer feedback guide how we were building out the technology. And that's kind of like the methodical way to approach this. It's really the crux of the lean startup. And the lean startup methodology is that customer feedback guides your process, guides your iterative approach. And that's what we spent 4 or 5 years doing until we actually built something that people would use and keep using.
And I'm guessing you probably built it a few times.
We've rebuilt the thing 1,000 times from the inside out. Like,
and that's the funny thing about it, isn't it? Like you think you're going to, I say to a lot of people, you think you're going to get something right until somebody actually touches it. And with
right.
software, it's the same thing. Like I talk to my guys and we develop something, I go to use it. I go, hang on a minute, this is not going to work. Because
there's a quote of that I like from an author named Steve Blank, and he says, "No business plan survives first touch with the customer," and it's true. Yeah. And it's kind of like that Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the nose." And the only way you learn is just to get the product out there into the wild, into the marketplace, get the minimum viable product that you can, and then get feedback around that, and just make it better and better and better. There's just no other way to kind of work your way through inventing something from scratch.
And I think that's a danger. Like I think a lot of people, I think there's two roads there. One is that you listen to the customer and then do what they say, without validating why they're saying it. And so sometimes people will say to you, I want you to do it this way. And I remember when I was doing accounting software, this guy came to me once, and in Australia we had sales tax. Before we had GST, which is goods and services tax, was just the flat tax on top of everything. Sales tax was like a tax that they taxed at 22% before the sale. And it was complicated, right? And only certain people paid it and all this sort of stuff. This guy comes to me, and I've got accounting software. He said, I want you to change the accounting software to make it charge the tax after, not before. I go, that's illegal. You don't want to go to jail for that, but I don't, right? I'm not going to change it anymore. I'm not going to get anybody to change it because it's obviously going to be a problem. And I think the danger sometimes is you listen to people, and we have this with clients, and listen to one person say one thing, and they think that's the answer when it's opinion. Right.
It's tough because what do you listen to? What don't you listen to? I think in the early days, you have to be looking for patterns, and you have to be looking for trends, and you have to be looking for like a predominance of things that people want. Otherwise, you'll be building a unique solution for 100 different people, 100 different use cases, and you won't be good to any of them.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to use a little bit of finesse to understand where do you take it. And if you're getting enough feedback and you're making it dead simple for users and customers to give you that feedback, removing all the friction that exists between you and your customer so they can easily give you feedback. And that might be live chat on every view in the app or website, or it might be your cell number on the product, or it might be an email that hits you up on your phone, whatever. Like, make it in the early days really easy for people to give you the feedback, because that's free R&D. And you're never going to be at a loss for what you need to be focusing the team on, because you're constantly getting this river of feedback from the dozen or 100 or 200 or 1,000 people using your product.
And that's an interesting thing. Actually, the side issue today, a friend of mine asked, because she actually lost her internet, so she couldn't use her phone's internet, right? And she said, can you give me Telstra's phone number? It's our major Telstra phone provider. I go to the website, they've got no phone number, the phone company with no phone number. This is the major company in Australia. And I had to Google their phone number to find it. So someone was like, you're not thinking, guys. Like, okay, you can go and ask the community. You've got, there's, you know what I mean? Like, they just kind of outsource their problems to other people and didn't actually provide an actual phone number to call. And it's like, this is bizarre. Like, it's almost like they've gone down the Microsoft route. Like, Microsoft was king at not getting contacted. Like, you could never find them in the early days. Still to this day, I reckon they don't have a phone number. Facebook doesn't have a phone number, right? They hide from you. And you think, how the hell do you get away with that? Because generally speaking, and then you know what happens? People on the websites think they've got to do the same thing.
That's
And
right.
that's crazy talk, because
You're not.
no one will contact you. They don't trust you. It's because Facebook has got 2 billion users and get away with that having a phone number. Doesn't mean you can.
That's exactly right. And yeah, they can get away with it because they have scale and network effects, and they've been around for 10 or 20 or 100 years.
Yeah.
You as the new entrepreneur can't do that. You have to make it
contactable. Like that.
dead simple.
And the other
Dead
thing
simple.
the other interesting thing I like to do with accounting software, anyway, probably works with everything else, is if someone said, I really want this feature, right? I really got to have this feature in the account. I won't buy it without it. I go, okay, great. So will you use it? If I get it for you, will you use it? They go, no, it's just an idea. And I think it applied to everything. Like you said, something, yeah, okay, if I do this, will you do it? Okay, will you join? Will you pay money? No. Okay, what exactly was this idea? I'll just make it up stuff.
That's tough, and if you're talking to enough people, it might be 12, it might be 50, it might be 100. As much as you can, you need more data points to understand where you're going to take the focus of the team.
Yeah.
And there's it can be really scary when you're kind of just shooting from the hip and you're making bets and they actually, like, a bad bet turns out to be right. That's the worst thing that can happen to you, because then you think that's the way you should do it, and you continue to do that, and then you start making really bad bets. The only way to have confidence around this stuff is to get as much of that feedback as you can. Don't think that you're the Telstar or that you're Microsoft or Google. You're not. You got to let it be easy for these people to contact you, so you understand what you need to be focusing on.
And the funny thing about it is, my son showed me a link the other day of all the failed projects of Google that they shut down. They archive them, hundreds,
right.
100 on a page. And it's like, these guys, they're just experiments, right? They're testing stuff around. They're throwing money at it because they've got the money to throw at it. You don't have that sort of money to throw at mistakes and experiments like that. You have to kind of not necessarily get it right the first time. You certainly can't be throwing big monies at those sort of big mistakes.
Absolutely. They're still experimenting too. They're just making bigger bets. But like to your earlier point of the accounting software, if you want to create a new piece of accounting software, you have to make it easy for those people inside of the app to reach you. And you just have to remove all that friction, because there's founder logic and there's customer logic, and there's a big gap between the two. And the only way to close that gap is just to make it easy for them to tell you what's on their mind. And you get as much of that as you can, it closes the gap between founder logic and customer logic.
It was actually interesting when I took over this accounting software business a while now, 15 years ago now maybe. We had customer complaints this high, print out a sheet for every complaint. It was well over that high. And I thought, well, I'll get a sales guy to call them to help them, because they've obviously got a problem we need to deal with. So we rang them up, and what we found out was that they needed to pay more money to solve the problem. We turned around from being 19th in the world, number 19 in the world in sales, to number 2 in the world in 4 years, because we actually went and asked the customers why they were complaining and what can we do to help them, and invariably it was to pay money to help them. They so look, you need to upgrade, you need to someone need to come fix this for you, whatever. But the reality was, most people, these complaints were just being sidelined and ignored, because there's so many of them. They'll go, look, we can't deal with this. So
never would have gotten that insight had you not solicited it.
Yeah. And we found out so many things, and it developed the products that we then turned around and started developing and said, okay, well, these people want a payment plan. And so we invented monthly cover, which no one had ever had back then. And so I think that's the thing, customer complaints are gold. Like, people avoid them. I see them all the time. People complain. And I've had it, you complain, you fill out this form online, you think, they're never going to call me. No one's ever going to read this. And they never do, right? Because they never hear back from anybody. And it's like, well, what did you ask for in the first place? And one thing's ask. The second thing's, bloody well, read it. Right?
Yeah. As a new startup, you don't have the luxury because then you're either going to be lucky or you're going to be wrong with every decision you make. And if you're not soliciting that user feedback, then you're just kind of shooting from the hip, and you're hoping it's going to work out. Hope's a terrible strategy.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, some stuff will come good, but the reality is it might not be the good you're hoping for anyway. So.
That's right.
So did you, like, I'm assuming you're not a programmer, so you got someone to write code for you. How was that fun? Was that fun for you?
Well, actually, so in the early days, we didn't know, my two co-founders and I did not know how to code. And so the first thing we did is we hired a development agency to build what we thought GreenPal should be.
Yep.
And we spent $150,000 doing that. And we launched it, and it was a total failure, unmitigated disaster. Didn't have the features it needed. It was very much of a waterfall type of style of building the software. So we didn't have like the feedback like baked into the process. And we were quickly confronted with the reality that if we were going to be in the tech business, we were going to have to learn how to build software. And so reluctantly, my two co-founders and I learned how to build software. My co-founder went to a dev boot camp in Nashville, Tennessee, where we live. It's a 6-month program. He learned just enough to build the back end of the project. I learned how to become a terrible front end engineer, and just good enough to where we could hack together the next version and then just make it better and better and better. And then as time went on, we started making a little bit of money to where we could then hire developers on an hourly basis. And only then were we in a position where we could delegate the stuff, because we kind of knew a little bit, to go back to the Mario analogy, we knew just enough to be dangerous to be able to build and delegate. And
that's an interesting story, because it's kind of similar to what I've had. When you employed an agency to write something, their role is to get the job done. Their job's not what you think you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve this vision that you've got, and they listen to you, but the reality is they're not. And
that's
so
right.
Basically you're going, well, how much money can we make out of this? And how can we get to the end of this project and maybe get another project? But the reality is they want to finish the project and get paid. And so I think the danger is that, and it's interesting when you watch like Shark Tank and stuff like that, when they bring on these technology companies and they ask the question, so who's the technology founder in this company? And they go, oh, we don't have anybody. And they verbally never get an offer, because inside the business understands the tech. And if you don't understand the tech in this kind of business, you're doomed, because people will just trick you into the wrong things, and then you're doomed.
You're doomed. The interests are never aligned when you try to outsource this stuff off the jump. And the way I kind of like make sense of it is it's like trying to open up a 5-star restaurant with no chef. And there's just, your core competency is technology. You have to be able to execute that. You have to be able to iterate that. You have to be able to release 8 improvements, 10 improvements, 50 improvements a day. And you just can't do this stuff, or even hope to do it, if you don't know how to do it. And if you're trying to outsource it to a freelancer or a shop, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster.
And I was looking at I actually had a look at your website. And when you look at your front end of your website, it's a bit like a Facebook, because the reason why Facebook got so successful is, and you was frictionless, right? And that's kind of what Facebook does. The sign up for Facebook's like, give me your email address and your password, and you're in, your name and
That's it.
And I was looking at your website, I was looking and thinking, okay, that's pretty simple. There's not much there. And then I sort of had a little dig around, and then I noted, and then I went to, when you sort of sign up to look for someone to mow your lawn, you did a really cute thing, I thought, and that was you showed pictures of 3 people that could help you, right?
That's right.
That was incredibly smart, because what most people do is that you're future facing it. You're saying, well, this is the sort of person who's going to come and do your lawn for you. So you're almost putting it in the future for them. And I thought it was a really cute idea.
One of the fun things about trying to start one of these companies is you got to get pretty good at product design, and we have been in constant search of the friction that stands in the way between our users and the value we can deliver to them. And anything that's not necessary, we try to remove and cut out of the process. How do we make it quicker, easier, faster, cheaper, more reliable? And for 8 years, we've been focusing on just this one thing, this one chore. How do we make it easier? How do we connect people to the value simpler? And one of the things is removing all the stuff we don't need. We don't need a password. We don't need to know. We don't need to know like your work email, and we don't need to know your phone number just yet. We don't need to know all this stuff. Like, let's just get address, name, and where you want us to send the quotes, and that's it. And then like leaving little breadcrumbs, like, yeah, here's 3 people that are in your area that you can probably pick from, and just kind of like like this really just making it really clear as to what this is. I think if you have a website, it needs to be able to answer 3 questions in 3 seconds. Where am I? What can I do here? And why does it matter? And you really only have 3 seconds to answer those 3 questions for users. And that's what we have focused on.
Yeah, no, it's really well done. And I think one of the things that we developed in our software was that infuriates the hell out of me, and you probably won't, it's kind of like what you're talking about, is that when you sign up and buy something or we get something for free, there's multiple steps in it. And then often you've got a membership login, so you'll wait for an email to come. So you basically sign up, fill out this information, nothing happens on the screen. You say, thank you very much, we'll come back to you. And then basically you get this email. If you get lucky, and half the time it ends in spam, you never get it. And then you know when to contact. There's no contact options in the thank you page, of course, because God forbid you wanted to ring them. And so we actually created what we call one-click sign up. So basically they choose the product. If it's free, one click and then the password's done, it's emailed to them later, but they're inside the system ready to go. If off the one click. And I think when you look at that, that's the thing, how many clicks to the point where they got to do something? And I reckon if you click more than 3 times, you've got some problems because they will get lost quick.
That's right. You got to find all the friction and kill it. And, one of the things you got to get pretty good at, to use the Mario analogy, is copywriting. I spent probably 6 months taking every copywriting course I could get my hands on and trying to learn as much as I could about how to write really clear copy. Because believe it or not, little tweaks in your copy on the landing page, to the sign up flow, to the checkout, just little tweaks can unlock huge gains, and understanding, kind of how you have to craft your copy and craft your value proposition is a never ending process. And so as the founder, you kind of have to be decent at this stuff to get it right the first time as much as you can, and then be able to hire somebody good to help you and know what good looks like. Like you don't even know what the hell you're looking for if you haven't tried to do a little bit of it yourself.
And actually, I've got a client at the moment, very similar scenario. We originally essentially wrote all the copy for his Healthy Heart Network site, and it wasn't great. Like, copy was good, but not good, not strong enough. But and now we've taken it and given to a copywriter, say, okay, you need to improve on this. You need to make it sound better. You need to, but we know where we're coming from. We're coming off a base, like almost a first draft or second draft scenario, because that's all the copywriter will give you back. The funny thing is, a lot of people say, oh, go and hire a copywriter. I'll tell you what, the first thing you get back is their first draft. Which is not which you're then going to have to make work for yourself anyway.
Right. So
better to give them the first draft and let them fix it than you pay all this money back for the same thing you would have got anyway.
Exactly. And you can do 80% of this stuff yourself. Like the old 80-20 rule, you can execute 80% of anything with 20% of the knowledge and 20% of the acumen. And you got to get good at 80-20 of copywriting, of product design, of engineering, of marketing, of SEO, or whatever. You got to get 80-20 good at all this stuff to get something going from scratch.
It's actually good. And it was interesting. I went to Singapore a few years ago and I got in this taxi, and the whole Singapore culture is very interesting. It talks about good enough, acceptable.
Right.
Is the word. Everything's got to be acceptable. So if it's below acceptable, it's no good. So they even have a system where they're allowed to park, and they have their own little card, and they punch the card out when they park. It's built on the trust system.
I like it.
Right? Because the whole community is set around about acceptable. This is acceptable. It's unacceptable to park and not clip your thing, because then you're cheating someone. Right.
The whole culture is based around that principle. I love that. There's so many things you can learn from that. Even in the culture in your business, what is the standard?
What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, right? And it was funny because like their check-in, I went through their business class in Singapore to get from Singapore through to South Africa, and their entire check-in process from the moment you walked up to the desk to be sitting in the lounge was 3 minutes.
Incredible.
Right, that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine what would be superior, right? That was acceptable to them, that it took 3 minutes and you spent half the time walking up the escalator.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the thing,
I love that concept. Yeah, you have to get acceptably good at all of these things in order to bring one of these companies to life.
Not super great at it, because your ego will beat you down every time. I think the biggest thing and biggest danger in business, I think, is ego. Absolutely. Yeah. Ego is the enemy of trying to get a business going, and
humbly acceptably good at product design, engineering, all of these things, because you got to be decent at all of it. And you don't have enough time to try to master one of these things. Maybe you're naturally good at one of them, but you still kind of have to, like, it's almost like a T. Like you can go deep on one maybe, but then you got to be good at all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's talk about the business you got now. So one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs think of is that when they go into business, they're going to sell it. And I worked for a bank for 12 years, and what I discovered mostly was most people never sell anything at the time they want to sell it. They sell it for other reasons, whether they're going broke or sick, marriage, breakup, whatever. Something's going wrong in their life, and then they're trying to sell their business. And so very rarely is someone to actually sell a business on plan and what they're doing. So is GreenPal a business vehicle for you to eventually sell? Was the original plan when you went in? Is that the strategy, given you've sold the business before, right? You're trying to replicate.
Yeah, I sold my first company, and I came at the decision to sell it because I had kind of plateaued from like a personal development standpoint running it. And I was no longer fulfilled by the day-to-day kind of challenges of running it. I didn't really kind of conquer the landscaping business, but I built one of the largest companies in the state of Tennessee where I live. And I kind of plateaued personally at it for about a 2-year period of time. And so that's where I came up with the,
right? That's when you actually get dangerous in business. When you plateau and start coming down, then you're gonna tank the business.
That's right. Yeah, you're no longer kind of like your soul isn't in it anymore. You're no longer being fulfilled in it, and so that's kind of what I experienced with my first company. And I haven't experienced that yet with GreenPal. Like we're 8 years in, and I mean, every year it's like a video game. It's like you go from one level to the next, and there's a new final boss at every level, and it's always a new set of challenges, and it's always interesting. There's always stuff that you got to learn, and always skills that you have to acquire. And so I haven't experienced that. Financially, this was the company that I wanted to start. Because I did it the way I wanted to do it. I didn't have to like do it a certain way to satisfy investors or satisfy, some sort of like personal ego in terms of money. I kind of have built this thing the way I wanted to build it because I wanted to see it like be a certain thing. So you never say never, but for us, it's not in the immediate plans. We still have a long, long way to go. Just in the United States, the lawn mowing industry the landscaping industry is a $99 billion industry. The top 10 players constitute less than 10% of that. So it's highly fragmented. And so there's a lot of white space for us. So we have a long way to go. Even though we're 8 years in and we've got a good profitable company, we still have a long way to go.
So it's actually interesting. It's sort of a story that I did some researching because I've got this client, the lawn mowing client, so I did some research and I worked out why do people have lawns, right?
Yeah, the history of lawns.
Lawns are largely useless, right? It's a piece of grass that you pay to mow, and it's like you don't know, you think the kids never play on it because half the time it's too itchy. You think, why do you got a lawn? And I worked out apparently back in England and stuff like that, the size of your lawn was the size of your wealth. So
nice.
So when you drive around the streets and stuff like that, and you look at people's lawns, you can tell whether they're wealthy or what their priorities are like because they've got a beautiful lawn. You think, well, okay, something's going on in their life, right? So I'm sure problems go for the best lawns, right? Because they know they've got the good stuff.
I like that.
It was quite interesting, but the other reason for lawns was that, particularly in England, the bigger the yards they had, one was a show of wealth and strength, but also you could see the enemy coming. Right.
It was clear, and so you saw it was.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So it was like a sign of wealth and strength, and also it was like a tactical advantage.
Yeah. So I mean, today's the houses today, you haven't got much time between the front yard and the backyard because your house is pretty small. But when I look at it, like in my street, for example, half my street look after their lawn. I mean, I don't touch my lawn because I just don't have time, and I figure I'm going to do something better than my lawn. If you enjoy it, great, but otherwise not. So the back end of the street is all the lawns are good. The front end of the street, the lawns are bad. I walk past it every day. So when I'm walking around, I'm looking at people's lawns and going, I wonder what, you can tell a lot of people about their lawn. And I've got one of the guy's lawn we passed by, he's killed it completely. Like it's dead. He's actually dug it up. It's just dirt. I'm thinking, what are you doing with this lawn, man? And it's like, It's bizarre. So I think the lawn tells you a lot about people. So you start looking at their lawn, you're thinking, wow, what are these people thinking?
Yeah. Well, it's something about pride and ownership of your home, and if your lawn looks good, actually, it does affect the resale value. And I like it. I like your analogy of it. It is a status symbol of sorts, And whereas a lot of the users of our platform are working class folks. They've done the math on, by the time I buy a lawnmower, I mow it myself, and I deal with all of the hassle. I'm making less than minimum wage. I might as well use GreenPal, and I can get it mowed for $30. And
Yeah.
and so. Now it's become more of like a practical chore, but it's funny the origins. It was a status symbol, and it certainly can be. Like a perfectly manicured golf course lawn is not cheap.
No, no. I mean, I had a client, mate, I went and saw a few years ago, and I went to his lawn. It's like that thick, green, lush.
Yeah,
Right? He hand mows it, right? So this guy is like, super Murray. He's hand mowing this lawn, and he's got this thing super lush. And I said to him, man, that's the best lawn I've ever seen. And it's like, but she spends hours on it, but he gets something out of it, right? I said,
yeah. Certainly a hobby for some folks. Not me. I've mowed enough yards in my day. I don't enjoy it.
Another piece of grass. So I guess if you're going to start in, like, I always say, what's the advice to the younger self, right? If you're going to start something like a tech business and sometimes it's just a little bit of tech around your business. It doesn't have to be a big amount of tech, but I think looking at your business and thinking, how can I do it better than someone else? And to me, it's how can I automate it? How can I make it better for my customers? Sometimes that's just a little thing. So what do you think is the best thing in terms of, say you've got this brilliant idea, and what's the first thing you should do outside not hiring a developer straight out of the gate? Because that's obviously what people do. I think it's a great idea. Sign an NDA, which I don't know why people have NDAs, because as soon as you sign the NDA, you never get the deal. And so, what do you think that their kind of steps should be if they have a brilliant idea and they want to go and do something?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship's full of dichotomies, and one of them is, you have to have this huge ambitious goal, this big thing you're trying to like conquer and accomplish, but you also have to think and act very, very, very small. And so the smaller you can distill down the things you're actually working on, the things you're actually doing, and you're doing them, then that kind of expands your little circle of influence. And so step one is like to spend less time planning and more time doing. And so, like, what are the 2 or 3 things you can do and accomplish this week to get you closer to getting a product going? And so that might be, you use some of these low code and no code options, and you get together a prototype, and you get that in the hands of 10 people, and then you can learn about what you actually have to build. And all along the lines, you're learning how to build software as you go, like you're taking online courses and whatnot, because you're going to have to learn how to build software at some point. And so that maybe that's what it is. It's like whatever, like the 2 or 3 little things you can do today to close the gap between where you want to be and where you are, I think is the best thing. Like less time planning and more time doing, less time like theorizing and more time executing is a mistake that I've made, and a mistake that I see pretty much every new entrepreneur make.
Yeah, because I think in your head it doesn't take as long. When you get to a program, it takes twice as long and costs twice as much.
That's right. That's right. And you don't learn anything until you get something in the hands of people. So figure out like what the minimum set of things you need. Let's get that done. Let's get it in the hands of people. And it's like a fundamental principle of the universe. Like I take classes in MMA and Muay Thai fighting, and the only way to learn how to fight is to spar, to get in there and actually spar. And business is kind of like that too. The only way to learn about what you're actually doing is to spar with the customer almost. And I don't mean that like in a antagonistic way, but I mean like they have to interact with something. They have to beat up against something. If not, you're not going to learn anything.
I think it's the same as a driver's license, right? When my son was pretty good at gaming and he thought, I can drive this car. And
absolutely not.
As soon as you start this thing, you go, my God, how can he even control this thing to a point where the tyres are? And so I think the thing is, like I told him, like, he hasn't been driving long enough to know where the tyres are. So I think when you know exactly the framework of your car, and I parked the other day and it's like far off the wall. And he's going, how did you know that? I said, because I know where the tyres are.
Yeah, you got to know where the tires are in business.
Yeah,
If not, you know you're going to crash and burn.
yeah, exactly. So I think and that, yeah, you're right. If you do it, and we did the same with our software. Like we had a client that we kind of wrote around it. So because we think, well, this is an ideal client. So we picked a client we knew would need all these things, even though he didn't know he needed them. And so over time we built those things and made it work. So one of the things that we did was a silly thing, but when we sell an ebook, we allow only one ebook to be put in the cart, because why would you want to buy 10 ebooks? His market
let's make it
is 60-year-old, 70-year-old people who don't read screens, right? Because
let's make it simple.
Right?
Make it as simple as it possibly can be.
Yeah, something like that we discovered by 60, 70-year-olds people hitting that plus button 10 times and then complaining they built 10 times over an ebook. And so
exactly. You wouldn't have ever known that if it had not gotten into their hands. You got to get something in people's hands.
All right, cool. All right, so GreenPal's only in the US? Like, you haven't got plans for global domination, is there?
Only in the U.S. right now. We're in every major city in the United States, but soon we will be in Canada, UK, and Australia, probably in the next year or two. Nice. And so we're nailing it. Then we're going to scale it, but we'll be international soon.
That. I think I've read it.
It's a good book.
I think we've read all the same books.
Yeah, hey, you got to read the books. Lord knows I wouldn't have gotten this far if I had not read every book I get my hands on.
Yeah, and I like the idea of getting physically, because I think at the end of the day, it's a much more reminder that you got to read them, because I'm reading like 10 books at once at the moment. So
you need to be tripping over them.
Yeah, exactly. They're tripping over them. You're not going to read them, right? So really appreciate your time. And we'll put up a link to GreenPal for people to have a look at. I think if nothing else is to learn something, because I think if they look at your website and go, well, what are the principles here? I think it's a good exercise in what you should do, because I think it's really well done. And I really appreciate your feedback and your ideas, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
John, thanks so much for having me on. I enjoyed it.